I just finished a protection.
Is there a place you want us to drop?
Ed, Jeff, where do you want us to drop wherever, or?
We could just start in the middle at the Terraformer, maybe. So that's the
Okay.
big spinning one in the middle there. Yeah.
Cool.
Well then.
Wow, it's so
why don't we
beautiful.
land there?
Love all the catalysts. All right. Is everyone in?
Yeah.
Cool.
So the map is called Broken Moon. Is that what it is?
Yes.
So can you tell us just a little bit about like the lore behind the map and how it came to be?
Sure. So back after season 8, Rand, who is our designer on Mayhem, started working on the next map, and we pitched a few ideas. We started playing with the idea of a moon, and it kind of snowballed from there because we knew in season 10 Seer was coming, and there was this whole story about his prophecy, and it just started, all pieces started coming together. And we always imagined, like, what is it that, we knew that the moon got hit and it affected Boreas, but what would the aftermath be? Well, how did they live with that? So the moon here represents all the work that's been going on since Seer was born. So it's about 26 years in the making. A lunar expedition was sent to the moon to survey all the damage. They knew there was a lot of work to be done, but before they could bring people to the moon to fix things, they needed to make it habitable. So they brought science departments up here to create a terraformer and Atmosphere Station. So you can see the pink sky, like an artificial atmosphere that was created. And this colony was formed called the Colony of Hope, and it's on the moon Cleo. So eventually workers were able to start coming here, and we've got the Promenade, which you can see across from the Terraformer, this big giant wall. Those are apartments where most of the workers live, and there's some homes scattered about the moon as well. And these people work here. They're all kind of pitching in to try to fix the damage and save their planet. Now along the way, we've got things like, private industry have come here as well to increase funding because it's very expensive to try to fix the moon. And it kind of all segued into what's happening now, which is the Apex Games have arrived. Someone struck a deal with Eduardo Silva in exchange for funding to help save their planet. They allowed the game to come on the moon and become the next arena.
Where to next?
Yeah, so we can just talk about this POI really quick. So this is the Terraformer. This is what Ed was talking about with how they were starting to terraform the moon. So this is the actual POI that is doing the terraforming. You can see there's like stuff coming out of the top. It's generating an atmosphere. It's spinning around, trying to create a habitable atmosphere. There's this like spiraling water underneath here that further helps kind of sell that idea. And when it comes to gameplay, we think this is actually going to be a pretty highly contested POI. It is fairly central in the map. It's not too big, but it does support, like, we'd say about 2 to 3 teams kind of comfortably. And from here, you can really kind of see and get a little bit of a lay of the land in terms of like land marking. So if you're like up top, you can actually get, this is like the sweet spot. You can actually get up here, but it's kind of hard to stay up here for too long. You can get like right on the edge.
Oh, really?
We don't want you going too high up, but you can get on the edge so you can get a good view. And you can kind of see there's like that big wall, that big blue and white wall in the distance. That's the Promenade. So we can go over there later. But then you can start looking around and you can see other landmarks over the rocks and over in the horizon. Like to the south, there's one of the Atmos stations. You have another Atmos station to the northeast, and then there's a few other POIs you can kind of see peeking over the horizon through here. But you can see the Terraformer has these there's these arms that link up to different directions, sort of like different cardinal directions you can head, and these are really good points to defend when people are trying to come up. So we find that the Terraformer is this like kind of king of the hill sort of situation, but you can't really defend it all from one spot. You kind of have to spread out a little bit. You can slide down these arms. It's really fun. You can slide down the interior of the arms as well, and then there's just like these interior spots with the legs. And you can see, like, to Ed's point, we're trying to sell the story through artwork as well. So this, like, there's a lot of posters and little visual storytelling pieces across the map that you'll see. This is just another way back up to the top. There's a vertical zip line here that takes you up. Yeah, and then all 3 arms are kind of similar. and that's just kind of the loop. And then you can, the other thing that's kind of unique about this POI is there's an exterior zip rail that just sort of like wings you around the perimeter of it.
These are fun, man.
Yeah. So you can use that to kind of rotate around a little quicker and get from one leg to the other. It's like a field trip.
Fun fact. Fun fact: the Terraformer is named Bertha because its Project Rebirth was the name of the project. One of our artists desperately wants to call this the Flush because of the swirling water at the bottom. But yeah,
Bit of a toilet bowl down there.
yeah.
But it's fun. You'll find if you're trying to control the top, you'll kind of like jump down into the water below to try to escape or get away. That happens a lot. Actually, we could probably just go through one of these. These are our lunar. Well, Ed, do you want to talk about these?
Yeah, so this represents the CRC and the NAB. So we got the Clio Recovery Council and the National Alliance of Boreas. They were the ones that kind of co-funded this mission to the moon. And these were the first kind of astronauts that came to survey the damage. They set up these camps. You'll see some astronaut suits here back when they were having to explore the moon before the atmosphere was created. Those are all, they're kind of like these pieces that we put together to make a bunch of different variations of those buildings. So it's like a style that you need to get used to and learn, but they're all over the map and they all play. Some of them play really similarly because they're the same configurations, but other ones are in different configurations. So we're coming up to the Promenade. This is a really popular POI because it is sort of this really centralized choke point, and a lot of traffic flows through here. So there's a few ways up into the Promenade. There's ramps on the sides, but you can also take these zip lines.
Wow.
And this is where the people of Clio would find their basic supplies. It's like their general stores, their pharmacies. It's basically how they can survive up here. This is where they get their everyday goods as they live upstairs in the apartments.
Yeah, you can see, continuing on theme, this one also has a unique zip rail about it, so you can kind of zip above the action. It'll take you through these doors, but you can't get on them everywhere unless you're like, someone like Pathfinder, where he can grapple to the zip rail, and other legends that can get the height. But there's certain starting points for the zip rail as well. Entrances and exits, a bunch of different ways in and out. So it's really good this area is really good for defensive legends. And there's some of these kind of narrow hallways around as well that prove for really good flanks just to push through these doors. We find ourselves a lot of the times in playtesting, the big question arises: do we go through the Promenade or do we go around it? Because going through the Promenade, if there's a team in there, it's like it's a pretty good choice you have to make. Like, can you squeeze through, or are you gonna actually have to fight someone? There's kind of a sneaking route as well under the Promenade. Over here, there's two pathways you can take to underneath it just to try to avoid some of the action, but you kind of put your back at risk as well. I guess we could go to the core. That's another major POI.
So we can go through some of these houses.
Oh yeah, for sure. We can go to these houses here. Ed, why don't you talk about these buildings?
Sure. So these are, I guess, government signed housing for the workers. They're quite swanky. I guess they got to make it worthwhile for them to come all the way to the moon to give up their lives on Boreas. But Boreas, we established from Sears' lore trailer, has a very dominant African culture. So we kind of brought in a few influences to make it feel like there's some of that here as well. It's got all the amenities needed to survive on the moon.
Yeah, so from a gameplay standpoint, these buildings, I think there's two different ones. There's like a smaller one and a bigger one. But these buildings are pretty common. These are like destination points we use a lot for the zip rails. So you'll see over here. Yeah, so this is the other variation. It's a little larger. These are really, really fun to defend because they have these like posts here, these kind of post up points on the edges here where you can kind of just watch down the zip rail line to make sure another team isn't trying to run up on you. There's good defendable spots, and then one of the fun things about this is if you come in it on a zip rail, you can get a good like momentum slide coming in through those doors, and so when you're coming into a good point. Yeah, everybody do it. Great. Yeah, you can get a good like slide going. this build's a little old, so it might have a little momentum issue on it, but that all got ironed out. So I think we'll head to the core next. That's another major POI. These bridges, also very, very popular positions for fighting. They create like a good hold for your team.
So the core is basically the energy source for the moon. They built this to power all of their various scientific endeavors. We see little yellow power stations throughout. It's kind of where they distribute some of that energy that they stored. So you'll find them throughout the map, but this is where all the power is generated.
Was there anything that kind of inspired you guys with the style of art here, or the visual style that you wanted to go with for this map?
Well, I've mentioned this in a few interviews. So one of the strongest themes was heaven and hell, right? We've done other themes like fire and ice and tropical kind of settings, but for this one, we were going to be on a barren moon, and we wanted to contrast that with the lush terraformed areas. So heaven and hell was kind of the motifs I was pushing on the team, and especially the grassy lush side was inspired by English gardens and Monet paintings, like that soft pastel sky. And you'll see Bionomics later has these giant lily pads and really lush flowers. So that really wanted to contrast against what we knew was going to be more of a drabber, kind of gray, alien looking place. We knew that we couldn't have too much of that because you want people to, relate to the areas that they're going to be playing in for a long period of time, right? If you're going to spend hours in this, you don't want them to get, fatigued by too much of a gray ambiance. So we do have some of that moon vibe, but then we contrasted that with more of an earthly terraformed half of the moon.
Yeah, so you can see in the middle here, this is kind of the honeypot, as we call it. So like the best loot's going to be here in the top middle. It's one of the sort of harder places to get to. If you look up, you can see there's actually a hole. So you can skydive into the top here. If you get a good plane path, you can skydive right through that hole. And then, yeah, it's kind of like, it's a tricky spot to defend from the middle because you kind of always have to watch every direction, and these things are rotating. You don't really know where people can come from. So we find like people defend a lot of these arms and kind of hold up in here. The other thing that's really unique about this point of interest is the fan below here. So you'll see this like blue energy. You can actually jump into it. It'll push you up. And you can use that to escape, to enter. You can use it to just kind of like rotate around the POI if you want, but it does put you at a disadvantage, and you are a bit of a sitting duck. So similar mechanic to what you guys might have seen on World's Edge with the updraft, but this one doesn't damage you. And so you'll see that this mechanic across the map in a few spots, this blue glow, and anytime you see a spot like that, that'll actually lift you in the air. So we put those in spots where like naturally it would kind of be a death pit, like you just jump in there and die, but we decided we didn't really want that, so we put this sort of like safety net in. So it's sort of a way that you're just not going to immediately die if you accidentally like slip or fall into the pit. Yeah, Ed, where do you think we should go next?
You want to do Stasis Net?
Yeah, we go to Stasis. So everybody opens their map and looks for Stasis Array. We're gonna head there.
This map seems quite large.
So it's roughly the size of World's Edge. It's a little bit bigger than World's Edge, but you will find that once you have like a full game of 60 and people are just ripping around on the zip rails, that it actually feels kind of tight and a little quick. So the zip rails were like one of our ideas for getting rotations, like quicker rotations. And if you're kind of out of the action and you're in sort of like a downbeat and you're looking for action, this is one of the levers you can use to kind of close the distances and stuff like that. So this is a launch pad. It'll take you up to a zip rail so you can grab it. There's a couple of those. You can see on your mini map, it looks sort of like a buckle or like a rectangle with a dot. Those are all the pads that take you on the rails, and the rails are identified by the red line.
The red lines. I was gonna say, there's no balloons in this map, kind of like Storm Point.
There's one balloon.
Yeah, there's one balloon right now. I'm trying to remember if we had two at one point. I think we might have gotten rid of it, but yeah, there's one for sure that I can remember off the top of my head, and that's at Eternal Gardens, which we'll go to next.
Cool.
Well, everyone's at Alpha Base. Should we just look at Alpha Base?
Oh, yeah, I guess we should. Yeah, so you can take that zip rail into Alpha Base there below.
So this is basically the first location where they landed on the moon. It's the giant crater. This is where they set up their first camp. It's the largest lunar camp, and it's just this network of these lunar habitats.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a figure 8 POI. There's a good like figure 8 loop going through it, and this is sort of what we call like a town POI, so it's a bit smaller. It doesn't support too many squads, and it's just a good place to rumble, to be honest. You have these good like loot circuits that you can do through these buildings and just kind of rip through them in a loop. Yeah, so we'll go back to Stasis. So there's a zip rail track right here that'll take us to Stasis. Yeah, so this is one of the longer lines in the game for the zip rails. And it connects all the way from Alpha Base to Stasis.
How fast do these things go compared to zip lines?
Will you tell me how? Do they feel faster?
Much faster, they seem. It feels like they accelerate.
They do.
Yeah, so they take your basically like inertia and momentum into account. So like if it's going up or down, if you're climbing up, it'll slow down, and if you're going downhill, it'll speed up. But it eventually maxes out. I don't know what the top speed is. I can't remember, but yeah.
Here we're approaching the stasis net in what we call the failed forest. You'll see like a radius of what's been terraformed from that central building, and parts of the map didn't really take, and this is one of those areas that didn't quite take. So it's a bit of a creepier forest look, and the stasis net is one of the first things they set up here to contain all the rock debris that you can see in the skybox, to prevent it from crashing into Boreas as well as crashing back onto the moon. So that's that grid you see up there. If anything were to happen to that, there'd probably be some big damage happening.
So this is one of my favorite POIs on the map. I really like it. It's got a good, sort of like a good way to contest the area. So if we head towards the dish here, you can see that you can actually get on top of this thing. And so it gives you like a nice 360 spot, but you don't have a lot of cover up there. There's a little bit, but we find a lot of teams they'll kind of sit up there and they'll get into some pokey fights with other teams trying to enter the area. So from up here, you have a pretty good view at some of the chokes coming into the area, like the one over there to the east. To the east, you can see that special choke there that leads to Eternal Gardens, which we can go to next. But anytime you sort of see that kind of fencing or style, you know that it's leading to Eternal Gardens. But yeah, you can kind of just loop around on this thing and look for people. You can also go underneath it. There's a little hidden bowl underneath this thing. That also has a central zip that'll take you back in. So we've had some like really fun endings at this point of interest. It's one of my favorites. You just have teams like trying to survive in here, looking out the windows, trying to like communicate and say which door they're coming in and stuff like that. So it's really fun. We can move on. We can head on to Eternal Acres here.
Sometimes we mix up our dev names. So
sorry, my bad. Yep.
Eternal Acres was the original name. We thought it sounded like a retirement home, so we changed it to Eternal Gardens. And it's supposed to be like a memorial garden for the people of Boreas, the people that are here on the moon, to kind of remember that day that the moon got hit. So yeah, there's beautiful topiaries, strange creatures, beautiful gardens here. That central tower actually has the one zip balloon on the map, and inside is quite a lovely kind of almost like a tranquil meditation spot.
Yeah, so we can go in the bottom. I call it a fairy pool down here. I don't know if Ed has a better word for it, but I call it the fairy pool. But yeah, it's just a really nice stained glass thing with god rays coming in and everything. It just looks gorgeous. But there's some really good loot down here. There's also a vertical zip line, 2 vertical zip lines that take you back up to the top. And so when you're landing, this is a good place to land, just in this central area here. And then, yeah, you can take this balloon that takes you up through the stained glass, which is a super cool moment. Yeah, and that'll just eject you over top of the whole thing. So you can kind of pick like where you want to move to, but you can't get too far.
Wow.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I'm just gonna stay here for the entire game.
Yep.
We can head up the hill here, and we'll descend on the divide. But this big hill here takes you just above the divide, so it's a good way to enter from above it. There's a bit of a sniper platform up here. And then this is just a really good control point in general. You get big views, and then you have like sort of a tight tight choke in behind them, so you can kind of just sit up here and get really good control over the area. And then you can enter into the divide. So this is another town POI. It's sort of like two towns facing each other with bridges in the middle. And then there is a zip rail connection that loops around. So if you're trying to get a quick flank on the other team or something, you can use the zip rails to come around and attack from the sides instead of face on. And then also, yes, there's the blue energy down here, the updraft energy that'll push you up if you jump into it.
And the vibe we were going for with this POI was that this town was once connected. It was once, probably had a main street down the middle. And then just to show the kind of fragility of the moon, it got split in half. These bridges have been set up to kind of almost hold the pieces together, but then that explains why we see the blue glow and the updraft happening there. So it's one of my favorite POIs. I think it's going to create some cool kind of side to side, middle building to middle building kind of sniping effect, if you're into that kind of thing. And the surrounding biome, we were kind of going for white meadows. So a lot of white kind of lavender flowers. We called it the cloud forest. You'll see these big white mushrooms in the cliffs themselves. Just trying to separate the various POIs so they don't all have, I think we have more than 4 or 5 biomes on this map. Slight variations, but it's just, flowers and color were ways to get that variety for us. And we're in Bionomics now, which is probably the one that's closest inspired to like a Monet painting. It's what I was giving as reference for the ponds and the lily pads and the beautiful pink sky.
Yeah, so you'll see we have some of these circular buildings here now. There's a few of these across the map, but they're the most prominent here in Bionomics and in another point of interest called Cultivation. And they're just really fun. They have a good circuit just around the outside of them, and then there's a good core to them where you can sit and defend. You can also get on the rooftops and use those to defend. They're actually really strong defensible positions, just sort of sitting in the middle of the donut. So it can be pretty hard to weed teams out of there. And the big landmark for this one, so you're in Bionomics, obviously, is like the water and the lily pads and everything. But there's a huge pink tree in the center with this alien fruit. So it's a little trenchy. I'd say that's kind of like part of this point of interest. It's trenchy. It's got these open spaces you need to cross. It has some of these wooden these roots that are these arches, so you can kind of use them as vertical cover as well to protect yourself from above. And then there's a bunch of little secret tunnels and stuff like that in between the bridges and things like that you'll have to find.
Just from a lens, so obviously you're thinking about game usage and obviously making these maps interesting from like a playstyle standpoint, and you're thinking about final circles. How much of the design is influenced by the thought of how it's going to be used in competitive, or how it might be used in a high level ranked, and can we keep this because that'll be too strong? Is that kind of stuff you have to deal with, and if so, how have you dealt with it?
Yeah, that's all part of balancing for sure. Sometimes we have a theory on what's going to be really strong and what we think is going to be really strong. We test it against that in situations where we actually play test it, but we find it's pretty hard to tell exactly how it's going to shake out. But once it gets in the live environment within the first day, the community has tested it probably 1,000 times the amount that we will, just because of the sheer volume. We always look for points that are too strong or that are really powerful. I can give you guys an example over here with something that we had to sort of balance out. So we made these rounder buildings, and they have this kind of lip on them here. So this is one of the strongest defensible positions that we find that we've created in this area. So you can sort of sit on the lip, you can go over the lip, and and so one of the things that was making this sort of more powerful was actually the grass on top. So the grass on top was really really high and really visible, and so that was one of the things where we were just there's too much grass up here. We need to pull this back a bit so that you can't sort of hide behind this thing and also hide in the grass. But we find, if you have a team in here that's defending it, it's definitely a strong position, but there's many of these, so you can have a bunch of teams kind of hold up in each one, poking at each other and stuff like that.
That was an awesome example.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll move on. We'll go to Atmos Station.
So we have two Atmos stations on this map. This is Atmos Station A, and the other one we call backup in case this one were to go down. This is where they were pumping the. That was me. So while the Terraformer is what kind of seeded the area, this is what kind of created the breathable environment. And quite a large POI, lots of areas to loot on the periphery.
Yeah, so it's a good vertical POI. This is probably one of our tallest POIs, I'd say, are the Atmos stations. Really easy to land at. When you're landing, most people land up here. And so this is the bottom. You get these big windows, these big round windows that give you a good view of the outside. They should also give you a good view of the exterior vertical zips in the front as well, so you can kind of tell if someone's trying to go up. Yeah, and you can just bump yourselves in here pretty well and go just sort of do a nice loop. These bridges right here, these two bridges are unique to the Atmos stations, so these are really fun to fight in. Some good windows, ways in and out. You can also get on top of the bridge, and then there's these panels here too that you can use to climb up onto the bridge.
And so the Foundry represents, actually, it's one of the POIs that kind of connects Catalyst to the moon. So the Foundry is where they are processing ferrofluid. This is actually extracted from the geology of the moon itself. It's one of the things they discovered when they came to the moon, that the moon's surface was quite robust. They were able to find this ferrofluid, create it. They're actually using it to patch the moon. And if you look on the other side of the moon in a skybox, you'll see ferrofluid literally holding pieces of rock together. Like they're trying to pull it and keep it from falling apart. And in the back of the Foundry, you'll see that they've got this tractor beam on a giant asteroid. And so this is what they do: is they kind of gravel rock, drag it into the upper area of the Foundry, and then they crush it and create and get to the minerals on the inside.
You can also defend the Foundry from the upper platform. You can't go all the way to the top, but you can defend from this edge here. So again, another highly exposed location, but highly defendable. You get a lot of good sight lines for people coming into the Foundry. But once you get shot, there's really nowhere to go. You just kind of have to go down and escape. Cool.
Man.
So yeah, we can hit up these last three, and then maybe call it there. So we'll go to the production yard.
It harkens a bit back to Sorting Factory, has a bit of that vibe, but it's got its own flavor as well.
Oh, any callback to Sorting Factory is a win in my book.
Yeah, so it's got this sort of horseshoe, small, not a full horseshoe, but half a horseshoe. We'll say semicircle. I don't know what I'm getting at here, but it's got this nice loop through the center of it, through the interior. And so there's a lot of CQC fights in here and stuff that can happen. And you can kind of just go through the space through the interior. You can also get on the roof of this thing. It's a pretty powerful position, pretty dominant position. But again, yeah, you're a bit of a sitting duck up here, and other teams can push you and come from a bunch of different ways. There's a few ways up. There's ramps at the back. There's a zip line. There's a couple of climbs that you'll find to get on top of it. So there's a bunch of access points to kind of get a team out of there. One of the things that's interesting with this point of interest is way at the back, there's a landing zone, and the landing zone way back here has some pretty solid loot. And then it has these two buildings that you can also control. So what's really interesting about this one is when you're contesting this one, a lot of the times what I do is if I see a squad going to the back here, I actually go to those buildings right next to it. Go to these buildings here. Oh, that's a good catalyst wall, whoever did that. That's
I saw that. It was it actually perfectly blocks the choke. That's kind of crazy.
So if a team lands there, right, you can kind of sit up here and go and kind of hold them back there. Gultch is another point of interest in this same kind of industrial family. I'd say in terms of just the team and the dev team, this is probably one of the more popular POIs. I'd say it's probably the most popular POI, especially in terms of the members of the team that are really skilled at the game. This point of interest is really interesting, especially this spot right here. It's another kind of cyclical donut, carousel type shape point of interest that you can loop around. There's a zip line that cuts through. That's super fun. Good loot down here in the center. There's a revive beacon there too as well. That's the main building, and then there's sort of a sub building over here. So this one kind of, you can contest it, but it sort of divides teams up into two most of the time, where one team will get the good building over there, and the other one will get this one, which is still really good, but not as strong as of a position. You can also get on top of these as well. There's a few of these buildings in the game. You can stand on these ones as well. get some good sights. We'll go to breaker warp, so we'll take the zip rail here.
Are there loot ticks on the map? I feel like I hear one.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So-
All right. I wasn't going crazy.
Yeah, we brought back the loot ticks from Kings Canyon as our loot mechanism for this map.
They're all over the place when you're running around. You'll hear them squeaking and calling to you. Yeah, this map or this POI is very much sort of like a I don't know if many of you played the original Halo, but this one
I was gonna say
when our designer built it, I was like, this is very much like that Halo map with the two ships. From the original Halo,
It's very
boarding action.
players.
Yeah, I was trying to get the name. Boarding action. So it's kind of like that, but it doesn't play like that. It just reminds me of that in spirit, I guess. But there's a bridge in the middle you can use to cross. There's a zip rail. So when you have two teams on either side, you can use like the zip rail in the center to cross and make a quick push. So when you're setting up, when you're trying to get a good defensive setup, it's always good to sort of keep an eye on that bridge, keep an eye on that zip rail, because when you take the zip rail across, it is really sheltered. So you sort of have to stand like right in front of it to get the most hits. So I think that wraps up the tour. I think the only one we didn't go to was
Backup Atmo.
The backup Atmo, but you'll see if you look at both of those points of interest, they're very similar building, similar kind of layout as well.
Cool.
But yeah.
Really appreciate y'all coming with us on this cool little field trip.
Recording stopped.
Now that the recording stopped. No, I'm just kidding.
What's the real
the
tea?
hell is this map? This
This map
is whack,
what is
man.
going on?
What? Gee, no.
The zip lines were so fast.